we're going to come back and cover briefly the slokas we've been covering the last 2 weeks. So we'll pick up from there. Which brings us back here, brings us back to sloka 54. So in this dialogue, actually, the question hasn't been asked yet, but the question is coming from Arjuna about how does this firm one, how does the wise one, how does the enlightened one act? How do they speak? How do they talk? So Lord Krishna is answering this question, and we'll come back and have some discussion about it. It's He asked a beautiful question, and it's so hard to know. This mind is so objectified. Coming from worldly life, it's so objectified that we're trying to find outer signs. And so that's the question he's asking. Is tell me how to see it, tell me how to recognize it. And so Lord Krishna here is describing the inner state of yoga. This is where we begin this part of the dialogue. And he's saying, 51, enjoying equanimity of mind, renouncing the fruits of their actions, free of bondage of rebirth, the wise undoubtedly go to a stainless state. When your understanding transcends delusion, then you are indifferent to things you hear about and things yet to be heard about. When your mind, which has been tossed about by conflicting opinions, becomes still and centered in equilibrium, then you experience yoga. So in this time, this is telling, right? Because we have so many things that we're arguing about. So I've just come back in, so I've kind of been in the world, over these last couple of weeks. We had 2 yoga fests. We had the yoga fest in Michigan and then one in Vermont. They're both very centered, that is very much focused on spiritual yoga, real yoga, not just the on the mat stuff. And so they're pointing at these truth teachings, but still very much out there, as it were. And everybody who's coming to these is dealing with the same stuff that's going on in the world right now. We get a taste of it in ashram, but we have some protection from it as well, through the practices, of course, but also we're a bit isolated. So Swami's checking the news every day. It's a requirement, but I don't advise you guys to be checking the news every day. So, but what's, to vax or not to vax, to mask or not to mask, and then so much disturbance around it, and so much of a question about what do I do? What do I do? What should I do? And you look and see when these kinds of questions come, is the mind disturbed? And if it's not, that's not yoga. If it's disturbed, that's not yoga. If it's not disturbed, that's yoga. So this is what's being shared. And so here, even in ashram, people get so disturbed about it. If I were to say, everyone is to do this, look at what would happen. So there's a clue there, not to be missed. Lest us think that we're ahead of ourselves. So, but we can also get a little taste of the other side. What would it be like if I weren't disturbed, if my mind were not disturbed by all the things that are happening? What would that be like? And what would it mean? Would it mean that I wouldn't choose one or the other? what's it like to choose one but to accept both?
Right. Yeah. That.
So there's an idea that to have this non-disturbance, then I don't choose. But if you don't choose...
That sounds like chapter 1 all over
It does, doesn't it? But if you don't choose, what have you done?
You've chosen.
You've chosen.
Not to choose. You have to, Prakriti moves you on.
So he's describing, and he's already described yoga. He's given the two definitions of yoga: equanimity of mind, and then skill in action. So we had covered that already. So skill in action he's already spoken about. Just to come back to the concept of skill in action, what's he talking about there? Who would like to say something about? What does that skill in action mean? What does it look like?
Well, it's hands on the task and mind in God.
Hands on the task and mind in God. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Satchidananda.
So the mind single-pointed, but engaged in the task. Doing.
Right.
Doing. And he's also shared that and he's pointing to an actionless state, which we will think means I don't do.
Right. Effortlessness, right? The outward idea of effortlessness. Right.
So, and he said that actionlessness cannot be attained by not acting. Yeah. Actionlessness has to be attained through acting. So just coming back to this, to again imbibe in what's being shared, and I observed the beautiful discussion that everyone had. When I first left, I think I missed 2 of the days, so I'll catch up on them. And I've been providing feedback and all of this, but we had a lovely discussion about it. But coming back to this, so acting, it doesn't mean not acting, right? So, and Lord Krishna is saying here, and we've been having this conversation as well. We touched on it some on the ride back up yesterday. So it means acting, but without an expectation, right? Acting with the mind focused without an expectation and an offering of the fruit. That's what's being shared, which of course is the principle of karma yoga that we've been discussing. Right? And then, so it doesn't mean not choosing. It doesn't mean that. I was having a conversation. We had a tea and Geeta session in Vermont on Sunday, this past Sunday. Muktiji had made chai. So vegan, no caffeine chai. And it was amazing. So much ginger. Mataji, we were talking about you on the chai. So, it might be time. Someone had asked a very practical question. We were talking about the Gita and some of the philosophy, and we started, of course, in the yoga of meditation, these 2 slokas that have to do with the mind. The mind is the enemy of oneself or the friend of oneself. These slokas where we started. And then we were discussing the philosophy, and this beautiful soul spoke up and said, I have a practical question. She described, she has a responsibility, and she said 2 mistakes with it. And obviously she'd taken a lot of grief for the mistakes that she had made, and she was quite distraught about it. I mean, this teaching is so practical. And so she was asking what to do. And so we had some conversation about it. I mean, the first thing, to be honest, and we really do need to understand this, is whatever you choose to do, some people will disagree with it. So, because there's everything in this world, including every opinion, every different belief. And if your goal is to get something back by doing something, well, from who? Now you're involved in pleasing of people, and then you're not doing the right thing.
Right.
Right? Then you're not doing what's to be done. So, first of all, negate this idea that you're going to please people anyway. The idea that people are going to agree with you, that's not going to happen either. So therefore, you're free to do what's best. What you've determined to be what's best. And if you're in the light, here Lord Krishna is teaching Arjuna to be in the light, to listen to me, right? And I will guide you. Oh, then we do it in an inspired way, but still to expect that people are going to agree with what we've done is so we can be free of that. For all of us. And that was such a relief, by the way, from a practical standpoint. For her, in that moment, that was such a great relief. It made sense. So all I have to do is what I've determined to be correct. Yes. And make sure that you're asking your own intuition, or make sure that you're asking God what is correct. Right? So that's wise one. And then also, having done that and having known that what people say about what you've done, or what is to be done, or what could be done, or any of that, it's not important. It shouldn't influence you or sway you one or the other. If you're looking at a matter that's a matter of science, then yeah, and if you have some faith in science, then absolutely go that way. Otherwise, ask God. Ask God and make sure you're really tuned in. That's the best guidance in terms of what to do, and then we do. And then people say you did the wrong thing. Some people say you did the right thing. Are the ones who say you did the right thing your friends? And there are the ones who say that you did the wrong thing your enemies? It's a craziness, isn't it?
It is. It's like second nature out there.
Yeah. So, but it's always been like this.
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's always everything here.
Yeah.
So there would always be disagreement. There would always be other points of view and all of this. Although, in the earlier discussion, Lord Krishna addresses that as well. He does say, do the right thing because people will talk about you. And it's better to have them seeing that you did the right thing, because then they have that example. Then they have that inspiration. And then, so this stainless state that he's talking about is going through the process, doing that right thing, the proper thing, not avoiding it, making the decision, doing it for an inspired reason, not because of what people will say about you because you've chosen it. And then having done it, not being tossed about by these conflicting opinions. The mind not being tossed about by them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and now somebody says you did the wrong thing. Okay, I understand. Somebody says you did the right thing. Okay, I understand. Not, okay, great. Yeah, I agree. I did the right thing. Or no, you did the wrong thing and I did the right thing. Not even thinking yet. Not even thinking that. That's called yoga. Not even having that that confusion or that.
Can I ask a question? So what if it's easier to do the wrong thing because of the backlash you will get in doing the right thing. And I specifically asked that around the family unit.
Cool.
It's
I
just,
was feeling the same thing.
it's just easier to go with the flow because I'm disconnected from the result anyways. And it's so important to other people. And the friction is so incredible to go that out
and sleep with it.
Which is like, fine, you guys decide whatever you want.
Well,
it doesn't matter that much to me.
There's a question of duty.
Yeah.
Whose duty is it? Whose responsibility is it? If it's not your duty, you should allow the person whose duty it is to do and have no opinion on the matter whatsoever. Be undisturbed about it. And if you ask for support, then you support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then you support. We just had something. Swami in the Morning Ranch. We're preparing for the retreat starting there on the 20th of this month. We'll have a 1 week Be Still and Know retreat. And so again, just very practical. We're dealing with COVID and what are the precautions that we should take for this particular retreat. And so we had a call between us and we talked it through and gave input without being wedded to anything but input. We had a very good discussion, and then it's left with them. It's their duty to issue the final report and the final conclusion. So, and at that point, you just stop, support, it's done. So there's a question of duty and whose duty, and also when our mind is in this disturbed state, recognize that we're trying to get our imprint on things that don't need it, that aren't calling for it.
But there's a similar aspect to this within business, where it's like if everybody wants to push against me and I just give in and say fine, then I'm waiting for things to go wrong just to say, you know,
Well,
I hate to put it like this, but just say I told you so, you know. But in a certain degree, that's how it is. I just state my opinion and allow them to go in the wrong direction.
so that's not yoga.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Okay. Yeah.
You just described yoga,
Okay.
boga. Just so, okay, there we have clarity.
Okay.
And then if you're asking the question, is there a way to enter that situation from the perspective of yoga? Yes. So, of course, keep your mind in God. Keep your mind with God completely. Keep your actions grounded in the intuitive self, in Krishna. Take guidance for them. Don't do something because you want to do it, because of how it will appear, all of this. Right? Come to the place where you see what's proper and beneficial and dharmic and for the good of the whole. And usually, we can't say always, but usually that voice, when it comes from that place, so that selfless place, when it truly comes from that, it has great power and it's listened to, practically speaking. And if you have to stand your ground, then stand your ground. That's where Arjuna is, by the way. He has to stand his ground. So, and he's going to stand it. He has a duty. He's clear on what his duty is. He knows what is the right thing to do. Krishna is reminding him here what is the right thing to do. So he's having clarity on what is the right thing to do, right? And then it's a question of how to do it. And he does it by keeping his being with that highest. Lord Krishna says later, think only of me, but this is the teaching, it's all through it. Think only of me, devote yourself completely to me, offer all of the fruit to me, and you shall surely have me, for you are most dear to me. So that's the summary of the teaching that we're stepping through, but it's here in every little bit of it. So that's really the way. And then, if you win the war on the outside, or you lose the war on the outside, that's not the thing.
Right.
It's the inner battle that's the real battle. He's already told us, you're self, capital S self, you're a spirit. Right? You're eternal. So the difficulty that we're having is that we forget that when things happen. So our mind is completely disintegrated, disheveled. Just because something happens, we forget who we are. You see? Okay. So this comes from the perspective of there's one thing important. It's not winning the external war, although Krishna had already decided who was going to win, by the way. So that wasn't up to Arjuna anybody.
And there were those that were dharmic on the other side, the Pandava. And they knew that was the case, but that was where they were.
That was their obligation. They had to be on that side. Yes, but
so here he's just coming back to then keeping this mind of this higher goal, which is to be able to do our duty, but without any disturbance, and not to lose ourselves in the process, before, during, or after. Being at peace through the entire process. And being at peace is that higher state. We could say being aware of, but also experiencing that higher state. And we all have experience with this, right? So we all have those moments where we're completely absorbed in action, so we know what the higher state is. Yes? You have experience with it.
Yeah, I feel like I try to use my words to guide, but if the group wants to go in a different direction, I remove myself emotionally from it, and I try to, and allow experience to be the teacher. And if I pray for them to be right. I want us as a family, as a company, to go down the right path.
Right.
But if my words weren't able to convince, I'm okay with allowing the experience to be the teacher.
Yeah.
And
if you're able to go through all of that with absolute inner peace, that's what's being described. Undisturbed by any other. That's yoga.
Mm-hmm.
That's yoga. And in that place of non-disturbance, there won't be something arising. I'm going to prove to you that you were wrong. That won't go.
You'll actually can participate with them joyfully in some circumstances and help them to weather the storm when it comes. And I've experienced that as well. It's joyous.
Okay, so we'll read more of the slokas. Oh, and then Arjuna asks the question here. O Lord, what is the sign of one of steady wisdom who is always in samadhi or superconsciousness? How does this person talk, walk, and sit? And just since we mentioned samadhi again, we've talked about this, but the meaning of samadhi is not what we think. We have some idea of some eyes closed experience. Our ideas of yoga are really also tend to be off the wall. Well, since this mind is so objectified, we'll sit with someone who's able to sit with their eyes closed for 24 hours and we'll say, he's in samadhi.
Right.
But you have no idea what state he's in.
Yeah.
You would only know that when he stands up and talks with someone.
exactly. Yes.
When he acts, that's the only time you would know. That's all you'd know. That's the only time you could know. Is when something that would stress you out happens to him or her. Now you can see if they're in samadhi or not.
A good one is a dog barking. That's one good one.
The what?
A good test for them is a dog barking. If there's a dog barking, how do they react to that?
It's a good one. It's a good one. So, I mean, there are a lot of them. But that's actually where Krishna comes with this. It's not their ability to keep their eyes closed. That's not yoga. And it's not samadhi. It's the ability to have the eyes open and be centered. That's samadhi. Samadhi not to forget. Samadhi. Sama. Sama is balanced, equanimous, balanced. Di, intellect. So undisturbed intellect, regardless of what happens. Here's where we get Paramahansa Yoganandaji, who says, the yogi, capital Y, is undisturbed in the midst of crashing worlds. So that's where whatever happens, intellect remains firm, steady, undisturbed. That's called samadhi.
But you could see their actions and words, but you can't see their thoughts. So how would you know if they're in samadhi or not?
And you can kind of tell. Here's where the Lord describes to give us a clue. You can kind of tell. You can tell a little. Listen to these and it'll help. A person who has let go of all personal desires and is utterly content in the truth of Atma and the true self is one of steady wisdom. So if you watch someone for a while, can you tell if they're motivated by personal desires or not?
Yes.
Probably after a while you can tell, right? So that's one of the clues he's giving us. And this is, again, practically speaking, this is so cool. Because it says that even if I'm in the world living the life day to day, and I want spiritual life, which many of those who would join us online and join us in Yoga Fest and like that would be very much living in the world, but committed to spiritual life and a spiritual way of living, then who can I trust? Who can I follow? Who could be helpful for me on the path as a guide? The first thing we would look for is someone who's selfless, who doesn't have any self-centered motivations. If they have self-centered motivations, run away. That's not a yogi. That's not one in samadhi. Next, a person undisturbed by difficulties, who doesn't yearn to be happy, who has no favorites, no fear, and no anger, is a sage of steady wisdom. Can you tell that with people that we meet? Right? Pretty well. Pretty well. You can see if they play favorites. Right? Now, the anger sometimes is hard to recognize. Anger, when sometimes, I think you know why. It's that thing about, it might feel like to me anger, but it might be a correction. So that one's a little tougher. But can we tell undisturbed by difficulties? When difficult things happen, are they disturbed? Do they lose themselves? And this, by the way, for us, wanting to know what does it look like when I'm enlightened. Also, he's answering this question here. So difficulties wouldn't disturb. No yearning to be happy. This one is an interesting one where we will do things to be happy, even when we're practicing yogis. We might engage in a practice because the practice makes us happy and feel that that's preferable to a practice that's not going to provide happiness. But that, when the duty calls, actually you would want to engage in the practice that doesn't provide happiness.
Like chanting workshops.
Yeah, we had this because that's your duty. So, and then there's a question about, is that disturbing? So am I longing for happiness so much that I will only do, even as a yogi, as a sadhaka, that which is providing happiness? So here he's saying the one in steady wisdom has actually gone beyond that yearning for happiness. We had this conversation one day. So if you know yourself to be Ananda, if you actually know it, then you won't crave it. Yeah. And there's an idea that says, well, I'm always going to experience bliss, but that won't be the case. Because you'll be placed in so many situations, and the field is what you're experiencing. So you'll be placed in situations where you won't experience bliss. But if you know yourself to be bliss, why will you crave it? Does that question make any sense?
It sure does. That's great.
Yes.
So if you actually know that it's your nature, and you know that you'll have that experience again in a while. So what?
Right. So
Then the craving for happiness falls away. With self-knowledge, the craving for happiness falls away. Does that make sense? Yeah, no more craving for happiness. So the one who doesn't crave for happiness, you can tell they've gone past. They've stepped past it. And so that's true for us as an individual. It's a sign marker, a road marker, mile marker, we can say like that. But also for someone that we meet that calls himself a teacher is called a teacher as such. And then two more, and we'll close for the morning. 57, whoever is free of all mental attachments. So mental attachments, you should do this, you should do that. Right? Free of that. This is right, this is wrong. Free of that. Who's not excited when good things happen, nor dejected when evil comes, is poised in wisdom. So also he's still speaking of that poised or that enlightened, or the can use it, steady wisdom. When one can withdraw from the senses, from the sense objects, like a tortoise draws within, one's wisdom is unwavering. We had, most of us know this, and Brett and I used the croissant story, living in the city and a French bakery pops up on your route. And so we won't tell it this morning, but we spoke of that. And we see what happens, right? In what we think is innocent enough. So the yogi, capital Y yogi, has the ability to withdraw himself from that and not have craving, not have interest in something. It's like when you know where it goes, why are you going to be interested? So that's steady wisdom.
Yeah.
So, helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll stop there for the morning. Anything else to add from that came up in earlier discussion, or any questions on what we've covered this morning? Hara, anything?
Excuse me?
I just said anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Kartikeya?
Oh, it just reminded me of the guy I lived with who was going meditating, and he seemed so cool, but then one time he had a dog barking in the neighbor's yard, and it just completely drove him crazy. It was just very interesting.
Right. So don't judge him.
Right.
Yeah.
But this dialogue is helping to see where there's really steady wisdom.
Yeah.
We'll see non-disturbance, things like this.
So it is okay to steer away from people such as, and stay with the wise if you can identify the wise.
Accept everyone.
Yes.
If it's your duty, don't steer away from your duty. Never steer away from your duty. So when you say steer away, you mean don't follow them.
Correct.
Don't follow them. Correct. Don't follow them. Absolutely correct. Don't follow them. Don't follow them. That's all. And no doubt there will be something beneficial said and done and all of that, but don't follow.
Yeah, I have a question. I thought, or is, I don't even know how to word questions, but when you go into a state of samadhi, aren't you transcending the person and the intellect is part of the person? Or is it required?
In an isolated way? No. In a holistic way? Yes. So if you've transcended, then nothing the person could do could disturb you. If you've actually transcended.
Samadhi wouldn't be a state at that point. Because it wouldn't deal with experience.
If you've actually transcended, nothing the person could do could disturb. Does that make sense? Yeah. So So here in Buddhist tradition, there's the stories. The student bhikkhu comes to the master and says, "Master, I get it. I'm not the self. I'm not the body. I get it. And the master says, one of the stories would be like this: the master hits him repeatedly, smacks him, and the bhikkhu says, "What are you doing? Why are you doing so much?" He says, "You said you're not the self.
Right.
You're not the body." But obviously the student became disturbed.
Yes.
So he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand.
Another test.
And the master was just showing him he didn't get it. Does that help?
I've heard those kinds of stories. Yeah.
I know. No matter what happens, non-disturbance. No matter what happens, non-disturbance.
So
That is samadhi. Steady mind. Steady intellect. Steady wisdom. No matter what happens. The duty is done, whatever the duty is, without disturbance.
yeah.
If the duty is to sit and meditate in a cave, then that's the duty.
Be present.
But if some person chose that, then he's going to be tortured, he or she. If that wasn't what was given. You see, that idea is so strong, that idea of what it looks like, but that idea is not correct. This is what's being shown.
Yeah, it sounds like it's equanimity.
It's equanimity no matter what happens. That's what, and we're not judging that. We're just wanting to understand what it is that Krishna's saying here. He's saying equanimity no matter what happens. But also that equanimity is only possible, real equanimity is only possible in the field of action. It can only truly be cultivated in the field of action.
Yes.
And equanimity is actionlessness. Right? The person who's making that diving end zone catch, you might look at them and think, "Oh my God, they are amazing." But they're going to say in that moment, they did the preparation beforehand,
Right.
and they visualized, but they're going to say, "But I didn't do it."
Oh.
That's actionlessness.
Yes.
Right? So that's a taste of samadhi. Okay, we should close.
So renouncing the result.
Well, it comes back to those three that Lord Krishna gives. It's think only of me.
Right.
So like this over here, think only of that goal. Think only of that highest. Keep yourself focused on that. Right. Devote yourself completely to that highest. Give yourself completely, no matter what happens.
Right.
Because if it can be no matter what happens, then whatever happens finally won't disturb, won't cause disturbance. And by the way, we live in a field where anything can happen at any moment. The asteroid can hit right now.
Yeah.
The Atlantic Ocean.
They keep finding them. They keep finding in the solar system new bodies that that haven't been tracked before in any moment. So. Any moment.
Right.
We live in a field that you can't control anything except yourself.
Cool.
That's it, and that's hard. But that's all you can control. And the good news is that's all you have to control.
Yeah. I don't have to
The
control it.
good news is that's all that's necessary. That's not the
It's
thing.
easier.
That's all that's necessary. That's the best news ever.
Yes.
And not a victim.
A good example for me was during the earthquake. I was in a Santa Cruz. I was in a house with a family. Everybody kept panicking, and they would run to one place, and then they would change their mind. And during this earthquake, so the whole house was shaking, and I would just calmly just stand in the doorway and just watch everybody, what everybody's panicking, and just to be calm in that whole thing was It's a nice feeling.
That's because the practice of yoga, the
Yeah.
practice of the science of yoga,
Yeah.
brings steadiness of mind.
Yeah. Nice.
Oh, okay, so let's close with time prayers. Page 174, is that right? Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivarnam Urvai Rupameva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshyamanritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivarnam Urvai Rupameva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshyamanritat. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivarnam Urvai Rupameva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshyamanritat. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhilah Sarve Shantiramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashit Dukhabhat Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Universal Prayers, page 210. O adorable Lord, mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. Bolo Sakri Shivananda Maharaj ki jai. Bolo Sakri Saraswati Mani ki jai. Okay, sorry. Arati is page 210.